"You can look, but don't touch." The security guard's words sliced through the air as he grabbed the old man's trembling wrist. The exhibition hall fell silent, crystal champagne glasses freezing mid-toast. In his faded navy suit that had once been his Sunday best 30 years ago, 78-year-old Anton Petrov stood frozen, his weathered fingers suspended inches from the watch he had spent 18 months of his life creating. The price tag beside it read $1.8 million. The nameplate credited only the luxury brand, not its maker. The Grand Plaza Hotel's ballroom glittered with chandelier light reflecting off glass display cases. Inside each one, rare timepieces worth more than most people's lifetime earnings rotated slowly on velvet pillows. Manhattan's elite circled the exhibition in designer evening wear, security personnel in dark suits watching their every move. Anton had saved for months just to buy the ticket, spending grocery money to see his creation one last time before it disappeared into some billionaire's private collection. He hadn't expected to be treated like a potential thief. "Sir, people like you don't belong at events like this," the exhibition manager whispered harshly, manicured hand gripping Anton's elbow to escort him out. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some guests smirked behind champagne flutes, others averted their eyes in uncomfortable silence. None intervened. From the back of the room, a man in sunglasses, despite the evening hour, lowered his glass. Robert Downey Jr. had watched the entire scene unfold, and something in his expression shifted from casual observation to focused intent. Anton's shoulders hunched as whispers followed him across the polished marble floor. The exhibition manager's grip on his elbow remained firm, unyielding like the passage of time itself, something Anton had spent his life measuring with precision. Each step toward the exit felt like another piece of himself being stripped away. The Chronos Celestial, his masterpiece with its hand-engraved astronomical dial, sat untouched behind triple-layered glass, its delicate hands marking seconds that suddenly felt too fast. "Please," Anton whispered, his accent thicker with emotion, "I only wanted to see it once more. I spent—" "Sir, the provenance of these pieces is verified by the brand's historians," the manager cut him off, voice dripping with rehearsed politeness that barely masked contempt. "If you were involved, you'd be on our guest list, not purchasing a general admission ticket." Behind them, a young woman in a sequined dress giggled to her companion. God, some people really don't know their place. Her diamond earrings caught the light as she tilted her head toward the commotion, already pulling out her phone to capture the moment. Anton's eyes dimmed, the light that had sparked at seeing his creation again, now fading. 43 years as a master watchmaker, and this was how it ended, being escorted out while people filmed his humiliation, treating his life's work like entertainment for their social media feeds. The exhibition manager signaled to a second security guard, "Please ensure Mr. Petrov," Anton supplied, dignity still evident in his straight spine, despite the redness creeping up his neck. "Mr. Petrov finds his way out without further disturbing our guests." The manager's dismissive tone made it clear the conversation was over, the old watchmaker now relegated to a security problem rather than a human being. The gathering crowd parted like water around a stone, creating distance from what they perceived as an uncomfortable scene. Wealthy collectors returned to their conversations about investment value and exclusivity. A tech billionaire loudly proclaimed that he'd already pre-ordered 3 pieces from the collection, his voice carrying deliberately to establish his status among peers. Through the shifting bodies, Anton caught one final glimpse of his watch. The Celestial's face glowed under precisely angled lights that highlighted the miniature hand-painted stars and planets, details he'd once worked on with a single hair brush under a magnifying glass until his eyes burned. Each constellation had been positioned exactly as they appeared the night his daughter was born. That personal touch was known to no one now. The auction catalog merely noted exceptional astronomical complications by brand artisans. From across the room, Robert Downey Jr. watched the scene with increasing discomfort. He'd come to the exhibition partly out of personal interest. His character Tony Stark's fascination with mechanical precision had sparked a real-life appreciation for horology, and partly because his presence added celebrity cash to the event. The organizers had been thrilled when he'd accepted their invitation, not knowing he preferred the craftsmanship to the socializing. He observed the old man's quiet dignity in the face of humiliation. Something about the watchmaker's weathered hands and the reverent way he'd reached toward that specific timepiece struck Downey as genuine. He'd spent enough time around both authentic and fake personalities to recognize the real thing when he saw it. The actor set down his untouched champagne and slipped his sunglasses into his jacket pocket. The exhibition manager was now practically dragging the old man toward the exit, seemingly eager to remove this disruption before it could tarnish the event's glossy veneer. Several guests were still recording on their phones, their expressions a mixture of second-hand embarrassment and the slightly predatory look of people capturing content that might go viral. Robert moved through the crowd with purpose now, cutting a direct path toward the exit. The sea of designer suits and gowns parted for him, not out of discomfort this time, but with gasps of recognition and excitement. He was about to use his celebrity for something more meaningful than selling watches. "Excuse me," Robert's voice carried just enough to freeze the exhibition manager in his tracks. The room's ambient chatter diminished to near silence as heads turned toward the unmistakable voice. Camera phones that had been documenting an old man's humiliation now swiveled to capture something infinitely more shareable, Robert Downey Jr., in an unexpected confrontation. The manager's expression transformed instantly from stern dismissal to practiced hospitality, though his grip on Anton's arm remained. "Mr. Downey, what an honor to have you with us tonight. Is there something I can help you with?" "You can start by letting go of this gentleman," Robert said, his tone casual but carrying an unmistakable edge. He gestured toward the manager's hand, still gripping Anton's elbow. The manager released Anton as if suddenly burned, smoothing his own jacket with a nervous laugh. "Of course, we were just assisting this guest who was getting a bit too enthusiastic about the displays." Anton stood straighter, a flash of hope crossing his weathered features as he recognized the actor, not as a celebrity, but as an unexpected ally. Their eyes met briefly, the old craftsman and the movie star, a moment of genuine human connection amid the artificial glamour. "He was reaching for the Chronos Celestial," the manager continued, pointing toward the glittering timepiece, "our most valuable piece in the exhibition, worth $1.8 million, Robert finished for him. "Yes, I read the catalog." He turned to Anton, extending his hand. "I'm Robert." "Anton Petrov," the watchmaker replied, voice steady as they shook hands. The calluses on Anton's fingertips spoke of decades of precision work. The crowd had formed a loose semicircle around them now, the exhibition having unexpectedly transformed into theater. Phones recorded from every angle, social media already lighting up with notifications. The manager shifted uncomfortably, caught between removing the unwanted guest and accommodating the A-list celebrity who seemed inexplicably interested in him. "Mr. Petrov, may I ask what your connection is to that particular timepiece?" Robert asked, loud enough for nearby guests to hear clearly. Anton's eyes found the watch again, visible through the crowd. For a moment he seemed to forget the surrounding spectators, the cameras, even the famous actor standing beside him. "I made it," he said simply. A ripple of disbelief moved through the audience. The manager's forced smile tightened. "Sir, the Chronos Celestial was crafted in the brand's Swiss atelier by their master watchmakers. It's fully documented." Robert raised an eyebrow. "Is it possible that Mr. Petrov was one of those watchmakers?" I was lead artisan, Anton said, gaining confidence. 43 years with Kronos. I retired 12 years ago when they moved production to reduce costs. My name was on the original certification, but he gestured vaguely toward the display where only the brand logo gleamed. The manager's expression hardened. Anyone can make such claims, Mr. Downey. We have documentation. That documents the brand, not the human beings whose skill made it possible, Robert interjected. He turned to Anton again. Tell me something about that watch that wouldn't be in the catalog. Anton didn't hesitate. The constellation pattern is not standard. The stars are positioned exactly as they appeared over Geneva the night my daughter Sophia was born, July 14, 1977. His voice grew stronger with each word. Look at Cassiopeia. I shifted it 3 degrees from the standard template, and there is a tiny SP engraved between the backplate and the movement, my daughter's initials. The manager scoffed. Impossible to verify without opening the case, which we certainly won't do for this performance. A woman in her 40s, standing near the front of the crowd, stepped forward. Actually, it's rather simple to verify. Her British accent and professional demeanor commanded attention. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Wright, authentication specialist for Sotheby's. If I may? She gestured toward the display case. The exhibition manager hesitated, trapped by his own predicament. Refusing would suggest fear of what might be discovered. Allowing it risked validating the old man's claims. After a moment's calculation, he nodded stiffly to a security guard who unlocked the display case. Dr. Wright donned white cotton gloves and carefully lifted the Kronos Celestial. The crowd pressed closer, phones raised high to capture every moment. Robert stood beside Anton, whose eyes never left the watch. The celestial map is indeed non-standard, Dr. Wright confirmed after examining it under her loupe. She carefully turned the watch over and pointed to the exhibition manager. Your UV light, please. Reluctantly, he handed over a small penlight. Under the ultraviolet glow, tiny marks became visible around the edge of the backplate. Dr. Wright looked up at Anton. SP? A tear formed in the corner of Anton's eye. Sophia Petrov. Robert placed a hand on the watchmaker's shoulder as Dr. Wright announced, "This is consistent with the personal signatures master craftsmen sometimes include in their work, nearly impossible to forge, as they're only known to the creator." The exhibition manager's face had lost all color. "This changes nothing. The piece belongs to the current owner, regardless of who made it." "No one is disputing ownership," Robert said evenly. But there's a difference between owning something and erasing the human story behind it. He turned to address the crowd directly now, his natural charisma holding their complete attention. We're standing in a room full of incredible craftsmanship, but we're treating these objects like commodities while ignoring the lives dedicated to creating them. Phones captured every word as Robert continued, his voice carrying the same compelling quality that had delivered iconic movie lines. Mr. Petrov didn't come here to claim ownership. He came to connect with something meaningful he poured his life into, only to be treated like an intruder. Anton stood straighter now, dignity returning to his posture, as Robert's words resonated through the hushed ballroom. For the first time, the guests were seeing not just an old man in a worn suit, but a master craftsman whose hands had created the very art they had come to admire. "May I?" Robert asked, extending his hand toward Dr. Wright. She carefully placed the Kronos Celestial in his palm. The weight of the watch, both physical and symbolic, felt significant in his hand. He studied it momentarily before turning to Anton. "Mr. Petrov, would you explain to us what makes this piece special? Not the price tag, not the brand, but the craftsmanship." The exhibition manager stepped forward. "Mr. Downey, I must insist." "I think we'd all benefit from hearing from the actual creator," Robert interrupted, his tone pleasant but brooking no argument. The crowd murmured in agreement, the collective mood having shifted decisively. What had begun as an uncomfortable spectacle was transforming into a rare, authentic moment amid an evening designed for superficial glamour. Anton gently took the watch from Robert, his hands steadier now as they cradled his creation. His fingers moved across the surface with the familiarity of a parent recognizing a child. "The celestial complication took me 9 months alone," he began, voice growing stronger. "Each star hand-painted with platinum-infused pigment. The movement has 624 components, all hand-finished." His weathered finger traced the edge of the dial. This thin ring of meteorite, it came from a sample that fell near Geneva in 1994. I had to wait 4 years to acquire a piece suitable for this watch. As he spoke, his entire demeanor transformed. No longer the humiliated old man being escorted out, he stood as a master craftsman sharing his life's work. The guests, who had earlier averted their eyes or recorded his embarrassment, now leaned in, genuinely captivated. "The moon phase indicator is accurate to 1 day every 122 years, Anton continued, pointing to a small complication on the watch face. "I developed a new gear system for it. The brand later patented it under their name, but—" He trailed off, the decades-old wound still evident in his voice. "But you were the innovator," Robert finished for him. "Yes." Anton nodded, a lifetime of quiet pride finally finding voice. "This watch, it is not just metal and mechanics. It is decades of study, tradition, passed from master to apprentice, thousands of hours hunched over a workbench with tools that become extensions of your fingers." He held the watch up to the light, where the sapphire crystal caught the chandelier's glow. "People see only the finished piece. They do not see the failed attempts, the components remade dozens of times until perfect, the nights spent solving problems no customer will ever know existed." Robert turned toward the crowd, now completely silent in the presence of genuine passion. "That's what we're really celebrating tonight, isn't it? Not just luxury or exclusivity, but human excellence." From the back of the crowd, a tall man in a bespoke suit stepped forward. "I'm James Harrington," he said, his British accent refined and authoritative, "Chief Executive Officer of Kronos International." The exhibition manager visibly paled. "Mr. Harrington, I wasn't informed you'd be—" "Clearly," Harrington cut him off before turning to Anton. "Mr. Petrov, your reputation precedes you. Before my time as CEO, unfortunately, but your work is legendary within our walls." Anton's expression revealed surprise mixed with wariness. "You know of me?" "The Petrov gear system is still the foundation of our astronomical complications," Harrington acknowledged, "though I'm disturbed to learn your contribution has been minimized in our public materials." He shot a pointed look at the exhibition manager, whose forehead now glistened with perspiration. Harrington extended his hand to Anton. "Our company archives contain your original designs, alongside those of only a handful of watchmakers whose innovations defined our legacy. It appears we have failed to properly honor that contribution publicly." Anton hesitated before shaking the CEO's hand. Decades of institutional dismissal not easily erased by one gesture. "It was never about recognition," he said finally. "It was about respect for the craft." "As it should be," Robert interjected, the actor's voice carrying a weight earned through his own journey of artistry and redemption. "But respect for the craft means respect for the craftsman. You can't separate the two." The ballroom had become unnaturally quiet, the wealthy guests seemingly transported from a luxury shopping event to something more profound. Phones still recorded, but many had been lowered, their owners now simply present in the moment rather than documenting it. "Mr. Petrov," Harrington said, "would you do us the honor of taking guests through a detailed explanation of this piece? Not as a past employee, but as the master craftsman whose vision brought it into being. Anton looked from Harrington to Robert, and then to the watch still cradled in his hands. Decades of anonymity hung in the balance against this moment of recognition. "Yes," he said finally, "for the watch." The exhibition manager, sensing the winds of favor shifting dramatically, hurried to arrange a small presentation area. Guests began gathering around as Anton was escorted, this time with reverence rather than disdain, to the central display area. Robert stood back, allowing the watchmaker his moment. Dr. Wright appeared at his side. "That was quite something," she said quietly, "though I wonder if it will change anything beyond tonight." "It already has," Robert replied, watching as Anton began speaking, his hands moving with the precision and confidence of a master, as he pointed out details of the watch now displayed on a large screen. "Look at those people. They came for exclusivity, but they're staying for excellence. They came to possess, but they're learning to appreciate." As if to confirm his words, the guests leaned forward collectively, genuine interest replacing performative enthusiasm, their faces illuminated not just by the lights of the exhibition, but by the discovery of the human element that transforms craftsmanship into art. By the evening's end, Anton Petrov had become the unexpected centerpiece of the exhibition. Guests clustered around him, questions flowing about techniques and inspirations long after the scheduled programming concluded. The same people who had earlier dismissed him now listened intently, phones capturing his expertise rather than his humiliation. Robert observed from a distance, sipping water while declining the champagne that continued to circulate. Harrington approached, his expression thoughtful. "That could have been a PR disaster," the CEO said quietly. "Instead, it's become something meaningful." "Sometimes disasters and opportunities look the same at first," Robert replied. "It just depends on how you choose to respond." Harrington nodded slowly. "We've been focusing so much on brand heritage that we forgot it's built by human hands." He glanced toward Anton, now demonstrating a watchmaking technique, using only his hands to illustrate the precision movements. "Our marketing department won't like it, but I think it's time Kronos acknowledged the masters behind our masterpieces." "Starting with him?" Robert asked. "Starting with him," Harrington confirmed. "We're launching a legacy collection next quarter. Each piece will bear the signature of its primary craftsman alongside our brand." He straightened his tie. "And I believe we owe Mr. Petrov some long overdue royalties for that gear system." As the evening wound down, social media was already ablaze with the night's unexpected turn. Clips of Anton's expertise, Robert's intervention, and the CEO's acknowledgement spread across platforms, comments, sections filling with discussions about craftsmanship, recognition, and the human stories behind luxury goods. "My father was a carpenter," one top comment read, beneath a video of Anton explaining his daughter's constellation. "No one knows his name, but his work stands in homes across Chicago." This hit home. The exhibition manager had strategically disappeared, but not before sending staff to offer Anton refreshments and ensure his comfort, a dramatic reversal from hours earlier. The old watchmaker accepted their attention with grace, neither gloating nor harboring resentment. When most guests had departed, Anton finally approached Robert, who sat alone in a quiet corner. "Mr. Downey," he began, his accent thick with emotion. "I do not have words." Robert stood, genuine warmth in his smile. "No words needed. I just couldn't stand by." "Why?" Anton asked simply. "You do not know me." "Because sometimes we all need someone to remind the world who we really are," Robert replied. "I've been on both sides of that equation." The actor's own history of struggles and redemption lent weight to his words that both men understood without elaboration. 1 month later, Anton Petrov stood in his modest apartment, opening a package bearing the Kronos logo. Inside was a letter from Harrington, a substantial check for consulting services and intellectual property licensing, and a small velvet box. Inside the box lay a newly produced Kronos medallion, given only to the company's most distinguished master craftsmen. But this one was different. Inscribed on the back were the words, Anton Petrov, master watchmaker, creator of the Celestial Collection. Accompanying these was a glossy catalog for the upcoming Master's Legacy collection. There on the cover was the Kronos Celestial, now described as designed and crafted by master watchmaker Anton Petrov. His name appeared in the same size font as the brand logo. Anton's phone buzzed with a message. An unknown number had sent a single image: Robert Downey Jr. wearing a watch, Anton's design from the new collection, visible on his wrist during a press junket. The caption read simply, "Some things are worth more than time itself. The hands that craft our timepieces deserve our respect." As evening fell, Anton placed the medallion on his workbench beside the tools he'd used for over 5 decades. Tomorrow, he would visit his daughter Sophia and show her the constellation that had guided both the stars and his hands, not just as a watchmaker, but as a creator whose legacy would now tick forward, properly acknowledged, keeping perfect time with history.